Okay, let's begin. Good morning, dear students. Today we are going to start a new course, Human Anatomy. And we'll start with our first lecture, Introduction to Human Anatomy, and we'll discuss a bit the skeletal system. Items to be discussed today. Number 1, about the Human Anatomy course. Then, definition of human anatomy, its place and role among other medical sciences, then useful links and sources that will be helpful for studying the subject, methods of anatomical investigation and preserving of the human bodies, then history of anatomy and famous anatomists. We'll talk about anatomical nomenclature, age periods, and the concept of onto and phylogenesis. Then I'll show you several things about classification of anomalies of development, and of course we'll touch a bit skeletal system. That is the building of Human Anatomy Department in Simferopol in Crimea, where you are going to study anatomy as a subject and where you will be spending your students a year and a half before your exam on human anatomy. The building is rather ancient. It has the history of 2 centuries, and famous Russian surgeons and anatomists, for example, like Nikolai Pirogov, was practicing here during the Crimean War. Anatomy, from Greek anatemno, means to cut up or to dissect. The definition of anatomy is it's a field of science studying the structure of the human body in relationship with the development and functions. Why it's necessary to mention the development influencing the structure? Because during embryonic period, some lesions may occur while developing. Also, the functions may alter the structure of the body. For example, in bodybuilders, those who exercise their muscles much, the structure of muscle is a bit different. The muscles are greater in volume and they are functioning in a different way. The anatomical languages are 2, Latin and Greek, but mostly, of course, Latin. All the names of the things, of the structures, are given in Latin, but for the names of the diseases, we use Greek roots. For some organs, you will use both terms, in Latin and in Greek. Since the development of anatomy, scientists all over the world came to a conclusion that it's necessary to come up to a common language. For that, they created a common language to name the same things with the same terms, and that is called anatomical nomenclature. First, anatomical nomenclature was developed and signed in Basel in 1895, then in Yen 1936, in Paris in 1955, and modern anatomical nomenclature in São Paulo that was quite recently, 1997. Of course, relatively recently. For studying anatomy as a subject, we recommend you the following sources. Previous, Human Anatomy. Sinelnikov, Atlas of Human Anatomy. Henry Gray, Gray's Anatomy, and Frank Netter, Atlas of Human Anatomy. Of course, because the human anatomy is the same all over the world for any race, for any nationality, you can use any available source in anatomy. And the good thing of you will be to find the appropriate or fitting you explanation. We all are different, and if you do not understand one source or the language of explanation seems a bit difficult for you, you can easily find another internet resource of anatomy explanation. So you are quite free to use any source, and these mentioned here are just the suggested options. Now, few hints from our teacher's experience for your progress in anatomy. It's rather difficult subject, but an interesting one. So for that, few hints can help you. Number one, use textbooks with good explanations. Use atlases and natural samples. Of course, natural samples will be available on anatomy department when you will be coming here and when you will be studying on anatomy department. Number two, study in groups, 2-3 students together. They save thrice the time for preparing one chapter or one topic. That helps to understand faster and to save time. Number three, learn the terms aloud. Since some terms could be very difficult for you or could seem strange, a loud pronunciation will help you to remember. Number four, make notes in your copybooks and try to draw. Notes will help you to involve the motor memory to remember the terms. Drawings will help you to make up an image in your brain, which will be completed later with the specific terms. And on exam and in your future life, in your future practice, doctor's practice further, first thing you will remember will be your drawings and the pictures in your atlases. And then you will make up your own 3D human anatomy atlas in your brain. None of the doctors use atlases when the patient is in the room on admission. They immediately extract their knowledge from their brains. Means you are to create your own atlas in your brains. So try to draw. Number five, do not leave the knowledge gaps. There are no unnecessary details in medicine. Everything is important. So these small knowledge gaps that some students remain from lesson to lesson, they can grow up from a snowball to a very big problem for you that will prevent you from understanding more complicated things. Therefore, you need to learn thoroughly each chapter from A to Z. Number six, watch internet video resources. If one resource does not suit you, you do not like it, choose another one. It will help. Anyway, you will find the good for you. Those students who complain for bad memory or for inability to remember at once huge amount of information, my advice is to find the shortest video about something, about one concept. Then, understanding the shortest video, find the bigger one that lasts more. For example, detailed explanation. And then, from time to time, your memory will improve. It will become better and better, and that will help you to develop your memory quality. Number seven, every day at least 1 hour devote to anatomy. Our memory is organized in such a way that our memory is like a pie made up by thin layers of information. So it's impossible to eat a cake at once. You'll just get poisoned and vomit. But with thin layers, layer by layer, better 1 hour every day, 2 hours every day, that knowledge will be more stable, more solid, and more reliable. So do not skip any spare time you have to devote it to anatomy. And number 8, never hesitate to ask your questions to teachers, because we teachers would like to share our experience to help the students to understand the things better, and that is for your use, for your profit. There are different types of anatomy which you will be acknowledged during this lecture and in your text book. Number 1, gross anatomy. Gross means macro or large. So these are visible objects or visible parts of structure like surfaces, like grooves, like tubercles, and etc. So everything we can see with the naked eye. The founder of this type of anatomy, of gross anatomy, is Herophilus, an ancient Greek scientist. Some books call him the father of anatomy. Here in the left lower corner of this slide, you can see the coat of arms of anatomy department with a mythical animal griffin on one side and Herophilus on another side, keeping the skull in his hands. Griffin is an animal that lives on the border of a live world and mortal or dead world, and he takes care of this border. In the center of this coat of arms, you can see the kyr and the scalpel as the key to knowledge, to the tree of life, and scalpel as the tool to study the structure of the human body. And the motto below says Morti docent vivas, in Latin Morte docent vivas, that is translated as dead bodies or cadavers teach alive. So that is for profit of living humans. For that we need to respect the dead bodies, cadavers we're working with, to get knowledge. The second type of anatomy is microscopic anatomy. The founder is Antony van Leeuwenhoek. Since the development of a microscope, the upsurge of science gave rise to many fields of investigations that were inside the tissues, so on the microscopic level. The third type, developmental anatomy. The founder is Charles Darwin. You can see here his portrait. That's about the evolutional development more than about the embryonic development. So that's about evolution. The next, age-related anatomy. The founder was considered a Russian scientist Nikolai Petrovich Gundobin. He was first to say that child is not a small copy of an adult, and the structure of all the organs and the functions are quite different, and there are different age periods within which the structure changes much until it acquires the adult features. Then, plastic or surface anatomy was contributed much or was founded by Leonardo da Vinci, the Renaissance encyclopedist, the master, who was really an extraordinary person. He was an artist, a scientist, anatomist, so even mathematician and inventor. He did really much in many fields of science, but that was the time, or the Renaissance, when all the scientists had encyclopedic knowledge. The next, topographic anatomy. Topographic or regional anatomy was founded by Nikolai Pirogov, Russian scientist, surgeon, and doctor. Pathologic anatomy, the founder is Giovanni Battista Morgagni. Pathologic means anatomy or structure of organs or of the body during some diseases. What happens, what is going on the microscopic level, or during some diseases, some lesions. So that was studied by Morgagni. Functional anatomy, Peter Levsgaard was the founder. Functional means how the function of organs, if exercised, changes the structure of the organ. Sometimes the occupational anatomy means professional diseases are also related to this group of anatomy. Means there are some professional diseases, like, for example, like sellers, they have problems with their veins as they're standing all day long on their legs, restless, and or like drivers, because the engines are below their seats, and because they're all day long they're sitting. Some professional diseases, they also occur because of the changed function of the organs. So functional anatomy is also one of the different types of anatomy. The next is ecological anatomy, means how ecology, how pollution of air, how other hazardous exposure influence the structure of the organs, the species in general. So what genetic lesions occur, that is the issue of study of ecological anatomy. Experimental anatomy means the scientists, before proposing any drug to a pharmaceutical industry, before that they are testing some medicines on animals, and then they are seeing the lesions in the organs to see, or to follow, doing some follow-ups to see what is going on with organs, and if there are the undesired side effects, this medicine will never be produced. So these preclinical trials are done on animals. Then the next step is clinical trials. If first step was successful, no side effects, then the new medicine is tried on volunteers suffering from some diseases. And if it's okay, only then the pharmaceutical industry start to produce the new medicines. The last one, not the last in general, but the last I'm going to tell about, is comparative anatomy. Means what happened to this or that organ during evolution. So in some animals, parts of bodies like limbs, they have some similarities, and as you can see here, the image demonstrating the similarity is that proximal part of the upper limb or forelimb has the single bone, then middle part has two bones, and distal part has many bones, and that is like that in many animals. So that is comparative. We can see how this or that organ changes in different animals and compare them. Now a few words about methods of anatomical investigation. They are divided into ordinary or traditional and performed on alive patients. That is, description means we can describe what we're seeing. Then biopsy and microscopy means we can pinch a small sample of the tissue to see with a microscope, is it, for example, benign, or is it malignant, or nothing to worry about at all. So this is quite helpful nowadays. And the easy one is anthropometry, means measuring of all the issues like the size, the weight, the circumference of head and chest, and etc. Among ordinary methods, we also have post-mortem, means done after death. And they are dissection. You can see here on the picture, dissection performed on the cadaver. And preserving of the dead bodies and of dead parts of bodies also is in formalin. It's quite an aggressive fluid having quite irritating smell, but nowadays it's quite usual for fixing the dead parts of bodies or bodies completely. The next way to study and to preserve the bodies is embalming. Embalming includes application of some ointments, some oils for preserving the tissues to make them stable, to prevent rotting of the tissues. And one of the most ancient is mummification. Most of you probably have seen movies about ancient Egyptians and about the mummies of pharaohs they preserved in the pyramids. And that method included evisceration, means removing of all viscera or inner organs, and brain, and only muscles, some cartilages, and bones preserved. That helped to preserve the body because only soft tissues can spoil. The next way to see the structure of an organ taken after the death of the human is contrast injections or corrosion. What is that? The organ is taken out from the cadaver and into the vessels. The heated and colored plastic mass is inserted. For example, the red heated plastic mass is inserted into arteries, the blue one to veins. Then this fleshy organ is put into some aggressive fluid like acidic or alkaline solution, and the tissue dissolves, and just this cooled off plastic mass remains. That helps us to see if there was some anomaly of this vessel, or if there was missing lobe, for example, because of the underdeveloped or undeveloped vessels. That helps. One more interesting way that is used, and you will see the samples of that, is plastination. Plastination includes the substitution of water in the tissue with silicone, the ordinary building silicone used quite widely. So first the organ is placed into the battery of solution of the alcohols of rising concentration. So the water is removed by that action, and then immediately silicone fluid substitutes water in the tissues. This makes the organs looking like rubber, but preserves the shaping of an organ, and we can study that without the irritating effect of organs fixed in formalin, for example. These are good examples of plastinated bodies. So Günther von Hagens, the scientist, the anatomist in Germany, created his world of plastination or body worlds, and all the bodies here they were preserved in specific gestures. For example, the body playing chess or the volleyball player, and as you can see here, only muscles remain, and he tried to make up the image of eyes. So this is also plastination, or altering of muscles features to help them to acquire stability. Also, one of the post-mortal methods is method of frozen cuts or ice section. developed by Nikolai Pirogov, a Russian scientist and doctor. What did he do is, during the Crimean War, he collected the cadavers, the bodies of the deadly wounded soldiers in the battlefields. And as this happened in winter in the severe frosts, he just made cuts, slices of the cadavers, vertical, horizontal, and based on that, he edited the first very comprehensive atlas of human anatomy that helped to develop extraordinary surgeons, because they could see the interrelationship of organs in the body. Before that atlas, the knowledge was not so much precise. Modern methods of anatomical investigation include quite routine ways we use very often, like X-ray films, which show us the dense tissues. In X-ray, how to read X-ray films? The main principle is the more dense tissues are looking like brighter, and the more loose tissues, they are dark. And thus we can see if there is something bright, means the tissue is more dense. The lungs should be more loose, and they are seen more dark. Also, routine ways that are quite broadly used nowadays are ultrasound. Here you can see the slide with the embryo. Oh no, that's already fetus in utero of 12 weeks. Here is that. Computer tomography scanning, or shortly CT scan, that mostly shows the hard tissues. We usually use CT scan for seeing the organs of thoracic cavity, abdominal or pelvic cavities, or some anomalies of bones or vertebral column, hernias, etc. And MRI, magnetic resonance imaging. These are mostly mostly used for soft tissues, for example, like brain. And the cuts are done very precise. We can see very, very fine structures. Now, a few questions that will help you to check if you understood the things right. Question 1. What does the word anatomy mean? Can you say? Okay, the word anatomy means to cut or dissect, from the word anatemna. The second question, how development can influence the structure? Do you remember? Some of you probably answered right. Embryonic development surely influences the structure, because the lesions, congenital lesions, they all occur during the development in utero. Question number 3. How functioning may influence the structure? Do you remember? Okay. Functioning changes the structure, and I showed you even the picture of founder of that functional or occupational anatomy, Peter Lisgaft. The more we exercise something, the more the structure of organ is changed. For example, bodybuilders. Number 4, who developed the surface anatomy for artists? I think that's an easy question. And for sure you remember Leonardo da Vinci. Number 5, what are the modern methods of anatomical study on alive? For sure you will know that X-ray, ultrasound, MRI, CT scan.